I don't see any movement in the audience, and so we'll move on to the approvals of some of our agenda issues. And we, as you know, if you've been here or been watching at home, we have a new system which makes things much, much slower than they used to go, but we'll try our best. If you like procedure, this is your moment to really focus. So this is, the first is item L, policies. Number 1 is the first reading. It's not a vote, just comments on any of the policies up for first reading. Do we have any comments from the board?
Yeah, I have a comment or question. So the outstanding food service charge, and I guess I was getting confused between that one, because there's 2 food ones?
And the regulation.
There's a policy and a regulation.
Okay. So with the policy, it seemed really
So
just going after the people for the money.
No, but
and-
we're not. So New Jersey, this is a mandatory, yes, it's a mandatory policy. The state of New Jersey passed a law that requires that we lay out certain provisions of the policy. I guess in some cases, sending your child to school without lunch or money is indicative of, poor home conditions that may need further investigation. So it sets out a procedure. It gives parents, they get a first notice, they get a second notice. And one of the things that Betsy and I wanted to add was that we're going to, for the next reading, so we're going to add that the notices be provided in the language spoken in the home, so that there's no miscommunication. So this is not directed at people like me who forget to refresh the lunch accounts, but or maybe it is, but also really we're looking out for the children to see if there's something going on at home that we need to look into further.
And then are you expecting the families to pay? I mean, and I guess I'm really sad when I read they're going to get a basic lunch. I mean, it just
Okay,
saddens
because
me.
I had, so I
Which is
had
really-
this
I can't-
note as well. I
Yeah.
mean, if we're writing this policy, and I know this is a first reading, so I just asked policy to look at this. If we're going to great lengths, then actually, by law, parents are, by law, they have to feed their children twice a day. So if they're not feeding them breakfast and lunch, they are, by law, under the ground rules of neglect. So this policy is correct. And Child Services does, we do have grounds. So if we're looking at this under the food policy, and we're going to do this, that's fine. But to give the child a lunch that no other child in the school would pick on their worst day, to give them a lunch, are we doing that? Are we doing that to, why are we doing that? Are we doing that because the food services saves money by doing that? Are we doing that because the food services says, look, if we have to give them something, we're going to give them a less expensive lunch? Like, is there grounds for doing that? If there is, and there is an expense for doing that, can we send Hunger Packing or the Education Foundation or the PTO to make up the difference between the cost of that lunch? Because to me, if I was that child, I would either not come to school, not go to lunch, or pack a brown bag full of scarves and say I brought my lunch to school, because there is no way I would shame myself into bringing a lunch because my parents either could not afford to pay or there was a situation. If the school's on it and they're going to address the situation, let's put the child first and not put them in an embarrassing situation because they have a situation, obviously. If the parents aren't paying because they're like, duh, me, and I forgot to send in a check, okay, but let's not embarrass the child for it because the child does not have their hands on the checkbook. So I just don't see our district doing that to a child in any way, shape, or form. If it's a money issue, let's figure out a way to solve the money issue. If it's not a money issue, then why are we doing this? I can't see, I thought about this all day. I can't see a reason to do this. I think it's an embarrassment to the child. This policy really bothers me.
Okay, so and I appreciate the feedback.
And
That's-
it's a first reading,
Yeah, it's a first
so
read.
we can't fix it tonight, but it
Yeah.
really bothers
No, but
me.
we will fix it, and I think you and Debbie raised,
And
good
sorry,
points.
Debbie, but it's been on my list and stuck to my computer. I was like, don't forget to do this. It really bothers me.
And in our haste to get this policy out, we didn't have a chance to, read it over with a fine tooth comb, but the intent is not to embarrass anyone. I think all communications will be made to the parent in writing, via email. And so I hear what you're saying about the lunch. And Stephanie, can you offer more on that?
First of all, this is not targeted at free or reduced students. This is targeted at families that send their kids in and just their meals start adding up and they don't collect. And it's, I also would say Cranberry will have to have this if they don't already have this policy, by the way. Additionally, this is the other option. This was a policy that was given from the state. The other option was no lunch at all.
Yeah. We had a choice.
After
This is
so-
the option we chose.
My issue with
And-
it is, if we're looking at the end of the policy and we think neglect might be involved, I mean, because the child's not on free and reduced lunch, doesn't mean a family hasn't lost a job. There's not a divorce. There's not an abuse situation. There's
Right,
not
but there's-
something going on.
It's, the staff at the schools are aware of those situations. So
I just
they're
think
gonna-
it's.
So this is.
It's the food part. It's
But
the
I,
food
It's the
part.
food
but
part.
it's-
I appreciate the feedback because actually when I read it, I thought that just means no ice cream and no popcorn. And I sort of looked
Right.
at it with a different lens. So maybe when we go back for a second reading, we say basic hot lunch. But with that, I'm not sure we want, the extras is sort of what I thought we were getting to, was sort of let's give a nutritious lunch. This is also, I think, on some menus called the fun lunch, that kids can choose as an option. So I just sort of, I read it as a basic, but I think at policy, we can certainly go back to this in March.
It just
and reword
sounds
the.
like bread and water.
So what would you like to see?
What would that lunch look like?
I mean, I guess I haven't been in a cafeteria in a while. I didn't, I guess I don't want them coming out of there with ice cream but I mean, the lunches are healthy.
Right.
Yeah, we could
I,
just
I,
say
I just don't want a child to either not come to school because they would be embarrassed.
No,
I
that's
don't
a
want
good
them
point.
Yeah.
to not get their
Absolutely.
lunch because they would be embarrassed. I don't want to shame the child because this is obviously the child is not. I also don't want the child to feel like they're the one that has to forage for the
Right.
money to get the
Because
money.
right,
It-
absolutely.
Well, this is the first
Anyway.
reading, so you guys can take it.
It's a first reading.
We'll think about it, but those are good comments.
Noting what the lunch is, it says the board directs that the student will be provided basic lunch that will contain either sun, butter, and jelly sandwich, fruit, vegetable, and milk, or cheese sandwich, fruit, vegetable, and milk. So for those who don't have the policy in front of them, that's what you're looking at, right?
Right.
Okay, it doesn't sound bad to me,
It
actually.
doesn't, but there's no child in the line that's getting that. They're getting chicken fingers and fries. Just saying. So any kid that's sitting there with that lunch, everyone knows that they didn't pay their bill.
No, and that's not our intent, and so
Right.
we will reword, and we appreciate your feedback, because that's not our intent, and I see how it
I'm
could.
not pointing it at you.
No,
It's a first
but-
reading.
No, but, if a policy's gonna be
But we
read.
write the policy
Right.
that when Patrick read at the very beginning what our job is to write policy. I just want to make sure we're writing good policy.
No, and they're
Okay.
good points that we will
Good.
incorporate.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the first reading policies on item L1? Okay, thank you. More? That's okay. No, it's fine.
So the one we talked about. Microphone? Oh, sorry. The homeless and foster children, and I'm assuming, and you guys had mentioned something about all this coming up with all of our immigration, our current issues.
No, that's separate, it's separate.
That's a different one? Okay.
We in the policy committee, we're seeing on the news that ICE is increasing their raids, and we just discussed it generally as it might affect our students. The community has come together on this issue. These other policies these changes are mandated, and they're not brand new, but they switch policies around. Like, for example,
Well, the one that talked about foster
Right.
children.
So-
That's what I was kind of focusing on. And I didn't know if that was also including kind of
So that was
any
not,
issues we might be having in the future. Should it? Do we need our own policy for this? I don't know.
That's a good question.
I think
Yeah.
it falls under that policy, because if a child was in a foster care situation, temporary or, sorry. If a student was in a foster situation, a policy would apply. Okay, so it could be temporary, like in a situation where their parents are detained. There are a lot of things that happen when parents are detained, including DCP&P getting involved and making sure that the child is taken care of and that all of their rights are protected.
and the child can continue in Princeton if the foster right,
Right.
regardless of where the foster parent lives.
Right.
Is that?
Yes. I mean, that's what it read.
Yeah.
It read whatever's best really for the child.
Yeah. So that's always our intent, is to do what's best for the child.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay.